Hey guys, welcome back to A Good Life Farm. Constance here. So I am just going to do a really quick video about cutting boards. I have gotten a ton of questions lately about my wood cutting boards, and I shared about several of the cutting boards that I have and are often seen in videos, and I talked about those in a cooking video that I did in the last week or so. I will put a link to that down below if you are watching this on YouTube or if you are watching it on Rumble, and you can see where I talked about the different cutting boards that I have, because I had a lot of people asking me about where I got my cutting boards, and so I talked about that in that video. The other thing that I have been asked a lot about is how I care for them. People talk about how their cutting boards just don't seem to last, and how do I go about taking care of them so that they last a really long time. This one right here, I've had over 10 years. I've had it for a long time. I do have a couple other cutting boards that I've had a little bit longer, but they're not ones that I use very often. But this one, I use it all the time, and as you can see looking at it, it is in really good condition still, even though I use this multiple times a week and it's a decade old. So how do I care for it? Well, first of all, you want to make sure you're starting with a good quality cutting board. Anytime you are purchasing wood cutting boards, you want to make sure they're made out of hardwood. You don't want cheap pine, you don't want a slab of wood. For instance, this right here, you can see all of the wood grain. This is just a inexpensive piece of pine that's cut into the shape of a cutting board. Now, I'm not going to complain because my son made this for me in a woodworking project for school, so that's why I have this. But I don't actually use it for cutting on because it's just a simple slab of wood and it's soft. If I was to use this as a cutting board, this would not last very long at all. It would in no time start getting cut marks on it. It would start getting grooves in the wood. This is a soft wood. It is just not designed for use as a cutting board. And I've seen a lot of cutting boards for sale that look something like this. Don't waste your money because it's not going to hold up. You might as well spend a little bit of extra, get a good quality board that's going to last you for years and years and years and years and years, as long as you know how to take care of it. When you purchase a good quality cutting board, you're going to look for end grains. You're going to look for sections, kind of like this, where it almost looks like blocks of wood that are put together, because that's basically what this is. This is butcher block. You have all these pieces of end grain that have been put together to form this cutting board. And whether it's in little blocks like that, or if it's in strips, I have a couple of boards that are like that, where there's strips of wood. These are end grained. It's going to be automatically harder than just a slab of wood. So make sure that you are starting with end grain, nice hardwood to begin with. A few places that I could recommend maybe looking for cutting boards like this that are inexpensive is your overstock stores. Check out places like TJ Maxx, Ross's, Marshall's, Home Goods. I have often seen cutting boards like this for sale there, and pretty inexpensive. Now, when I do bring home a new cutting board, the first thing I do is I give it a quick washing. I just wipe it down with hot soap and water, I rinse it, and I dry it off immediately. Number one tip for wood cutting board care is never, ever, ever soak your cutting boards. Think of your wood furniture, your kitchen table, or your end tables or coffee tables, any piece of wood furniture that you have. How often have you seen someone set a drink on there and it leaves a ring? Well, that's because you had that moisture get into the wood, it swelled up the grain of the wood, and it damaged it. And if you soak a wood cutting board, it's going to do the exact same thing. You're going to damage that grain. Even a good quality board, you're going to damage that grain, it's going to mess up that board, and it's just not going to last. So anytime you wash your cutting board, use as little water as possible. Wash it off, rinse it off, dry it immediately. Get that surface dry. It's almost like caring for cast iron. You want to wash it, but you don't want to soak it. You want to minimize how much time moisture sits on your board. So after I wash my board, then I go ahead and I oil it, especially when it's brand new. Now, sometimes you can actually find boards that come pre-oiled, just depending upon where you get it from. If you get it from a woodcrafter who makes these, they may oil them before they even give them to you, just to get them started. But in any case, when you get a board, you want to make sure it's nice and oiled before you use it, even that first time. And the way I go about doing that is, after I've washed it and dried it, I will use some cutting board oil. And I have two different ones here. This one I picked up at my local Lowe's in the wood care section. It's near the varnishes and the stains and all of that. They sell wood block care products there. This bottle is by Howard brand, and it's cutting board oil, specifically made for that. And basically it's just a food grade mineral oil, and this one actually has some vitamin E added to it. And so this is one that I bought there, and this bottle's actually almost empty. I went to the store the other day actually to get another bottle, and they were just completely sold out. So I went online and I actually ordered some more cutting board oil, and this is one that is another really popular brand. It's called Clark's, and again, this is made specifically for cutting boards. Now this one has some citrus oil in there, but again, it's a food grade mineral oil. That's what your cutting board oil is going to be basically made out of. So when you get the new board and it's nice and clean and dry, you're basically just going to take your oil, kind of drizzle some all over it, take a cloth or a paper towel and just wipe it all over the board, and then just let it sit. Let it sit for a couple of hours. Let it absorb as much of the oil as you can. Come back, wipe off any excess, and then do it again. And you want to do that 2 or 3 times and let it sit for a couple of days before you use the cutting board the first time. That way it will give that mineral oil plenty of time to just really soak into that wood and just kind of saturate the wood grain. And then once you've done that, it'll be ready to start using. And again, I use my cutting boards for everything. I do not have special cutting boards for vegetables and meats and anything like that. I just use them all. And no one in my family has ever had food poisoning from my kitchen. I can tell you that. But again, I always make sure that my boards are nice and well coated with oil, because what that's going to do is it's going to prevent moisture, liquids from the foods from soaking into the wood. If your wood begins to look dry in the middle, it is dry, and that means it's going to absorb anything that it comes into contact. So you always want to make sure that your boards stay nice and oiled. Your wood should look like it's got moisture in it, and then you'll know it's good to go. And doing that, oiling the wood like that, will again keep it from absorbing food liquids and bacteria and things like that, but it'll also preserve the wood and make that wood, that cutting board, last a really long time. Now once I use my cutting board for cutting foods, I will immediately take it over to the sink, wash it off with some soap and water, rinse it off, and again, I never soak the board. I'll basically just set this on the edge of my sink. I'll take my dish rag full of soapy water, wash it all over the top, rinse it, and then immediately dry it off. And then once my board is dry, I will either put it up or I'll give it a nice light coating of oil once again. I oil my boards probably about every other week just to kind of maintain them, and I'll just do that in the process. Like I'll wash it, dry it, and then just rub a little bit of oil on it, put it away. And again, doing that really has helped my boards stay good and last. And yeah. Now, if you do find that you start having a hard time keeping your boards looking like they're oiled, and that putting a coating of oil just doesn't quite seem to be doing the trick, then you could use something like this. This is a wax. It's like a beeswax that's also made for cutting boards. Now this right here, if you think about how, you know, you wash the dishes and your skin gets a little bit dry, so you put some lotion on, but sometimes you've been washing your dishes a lot and your hands are super dry and they need something a little bit stronger than your typical lotion. Maybe you need some nice thick hand cream or something like that. Well, this is sort of like the hand cream for boards. This is going to do a little bit more than the oil base would do, in which case you would again wash your board, dry it off, do a coat of oil, let it soak in, do another coat of oil, let it soak in, and then I would go and put a very thin layer of the cutting board wax onto your board, let it sit for a couple of hours, and then just take a cloth and rub it to get off any excess that may be on there, and then it would be good to go again. So I hope that answers your question. Hey guys, so I just want to interrupt here. I was just editing this video that you've been watching, and I realized that there was one more thing that I forgot to mention about cutting board care, and that's in regards to the surface. If your cutting board starts getting grooves and rough areas on it, there's two things about that. Number one, it may mean that your knives are not sharp enough. I know that might sound odd, but if you are having to use a lot of pressure to cut your food, you're going to impact your boards harder and you're going to cause damage to the surface. So you actually want to use sharp knives on your boards, not dull knives. Sharp knives are safer than dull knives because that added pressure not only is going to be hard on your boards, but it also increases the risk of cutting yourself because of that added pressure. The other thing is, if your boards do begin getting a little bit of damage to the surface, you want to address that. Those grooves or rough patches can actually begin to hold a little bit of bacteria, and you don't want that. So to repair the surface of your cutting board, you want to take a very fine sandpaper and just very gently sand the surface of your cutting board. And you can start off with a rather fine one and then finish it with an ultra fine one just to get this nice and smooth again. And then you would go ahead and re-oil your board as though it was brand new. So back to the video. Again, it breaks down to when you wash your boards, minimize the water contact. Always keep the boards looking like they've been oiled, because if they look dry, they are. And make sure you start right off with a good quality board to begin with. So I hope that answers any of your questions that you may have had. If you do have any others that I maybe didn't touch on, please go ahead and leave those in the comments down below and I will be sure to address them. Again, I've had this cutting board right here for over a decade, and you can barely even tell that it's been used, even though I use it multiple times a week. So that is it. Thanks for hanging out with me here again in the kitchen for a few minutes. My name is Constance at A Good Life Farm, and I will talk to y'all next time.